That's way too many rods. That is too many rods. That's kind of sickening. You know, people get mad at me all the time. They say, Roland, you got too many rods. What do you need all those rods for? Hey folks, Roland Martin here, and welcome to my YouTube channel. And today we're going to talk about rods. We're going to talk about the 5 rods that you really need. Sure, I got 40 or 50 rods. I got a lot of rods. But I don't have to have all those rods. I'm a power fisherman. I fish here in South Florida. I also fish all around the country for that matter. There's 5 basic rods that'll just about do the trick no matter where you fish, from Connecticut to California. Let's load them in my little tracker. Let's run down to the canal. Let me show you a few things about rods. Okay folks, here we are down at the waterway, and I have my 5 rods lined up in the back of the little tracker. And I'm going to take the first rod that I recommend, and that's a good spinning rod. You know, growing up, I've started my career and started my fishing with spinning tackle, and I still continue to use spinning tackle today. And I want to show you the virtue that I think we have in spinning tackle. Even though I'm a power fisherman, even though I fish a lot of heavy cover, this spinning rod is really a nice setup. This isn't just a lightweight spinning rod. This has braid. This is a really fine 20-pound test braid on a 2500 series reel. This happens to be a 6.5 foot favorite rod. Now a 6.5, I like it because I'm a little bit more accurate with it. Some people like a 7 foot medium action, either 6.5 foot medium action or 7 foot medium action. And here's the whole deal about spinning now. And I think what we've all come to find that by adding a leader, by adding a fluorocarbon leader to your spinning rod, you've really gained a lot. Now here's a fluorocarbon leader, a couple feet. I'm going to a Cinco, which is my #1 lure, of course. And there's so many things I can do with this rod. It's a good topwater rod. It's a good skipping rod for skipping worms underneath the dock. For example, I can take this rod and I can skip it in those bushes right there. Look at this. Watch it. Oh, look at that. Skipped it up there, way up there, about 10 foot up underneath those bushes. That's the kind of thing you can do with a spinning rod. Okay. The other thing you can do with the spinning rod in this setup is, because of the braid and because it's light braid, you can throw it a long ways. And we found that sometimes the longest cast you could ever make is sometimes with a spinning rod. I don't know, say a flat like this and going a long distance. If you see a fish break a long ways away, you can really get a long cast to it. Okay, and so what happens with the spinning rod, this braid is 20 pound, but it has the diameter of 6-pound line. So it's like I'm throwing a 6-pound line. I can throw it just about across the canal. In fact, I'm across the canal. That canal is really wide. That canal is like 100 feet across that canal. And I took this little spinning rod and this little bitty 5-inch Cinco, and I threw it all the way across the canal. So that's the kind of distance that you get, #1. But with the braid, here's the deal with the spinning rod. Even though it's a fairly light rod, with that 20-pound braid, it gives me the ability to set the hook really well. I can set the hook, not only that, but the medium action rod, you don't need, with braid, you don't need quite as heavy a rod. See, the medium action and the braid makes a fine complement for setting the hook, even all the way across the canal. That's a good setup. Now, I only have a 15-pound leader, so I have to be a little careful in the way I set the hook. But I don't have to have a leader. I could throw this on just a straight lure. I could throw a buzz bait on it. I could throw all kind of different topwater plugs. I could do a lot of different things on this rod. But it's something essential, because what I do a lot is actually I skip these worms. I skip them underneath a dock like this. I'll get back over there and I skip the worm underneath here. That's just a great way of fishing. And so it's one of my really favorite ways. Okay, let's get to my second rod. My second rod is such a neat deal. Oh, by the way, all that gunfire you hear in the background, that's my neighbor. He has a rifle range down there, and he shoots a lot. Okay, here's my rod. Here's my all-purpose rod. This is such a cool rod. Let me just show you what it is. This rod is so cool. It is my 7-foot all-purpose rod. It has monofilament. And when I say all-purpose is that there's so many lures that I throw with monofilament. For example, that's a topwater lure. Why I throw a topwater with monofilament is for the simple reason that fluorocarbon sinks a lot. And if you threw it on fluorocarbon, it would sink out in front of you and it'd be just a big old bow and line, and it would pull under and it would be a big problem. I also like to throw a spinnerbait on monofilament. I also like to throw a buzz bait on monofilament. I also like to throw a chatterbait on monofilament. This rod is good for all of that. And it could be good for Carolina rig as well. So it's an all-purpose rod. Some people say, well, how come you have 15 rods in the boat? Because about 5 or 6 of them are this rod right here, because I have 5 or 6 lures, and I don't want to be changing the line all the time and cutting the line, and I just have 5 or 6 of the same rod. Okay, but this is my all-purpose. This is my all-purpose. Maybe he'll stop shooting. Okay, this is my all-purpose 7-foot medium action rod that I use so much of the time. It just in fact, I use it half the time. Okay, let's get back to some more of the rods. A little bit more of a specialty rod here. What we're dealing with now is, you heard me talk about Senko fishing. You heard me talk about the fact that I think the #1 lure in the whole world to fish is a Senko. Well, that's what we got right here. Those guys are shooting up a storm. Let's just wait a second. Okay, here's my Senko rod. This is my worm rod. It's a little bit different than an all-purpose rod for 2 reasons. It's a 7-foot 3-inch rod, and it's a heavy action, and it has a nice big cushion butt on the bottom where I can really put it in my stomach and really set the hook. So this is a good rod for heavy-duty worm fishing. I'm a power fisherman. I throw a lot of jigs, and again, I can make a pretty good cast with it. But how I fish this rod is basically, so it's so heavy, I get it in my side, I get it all cushioned. I fish a high rod because I like to watch the line, and I don't want them to feel me as well. So I keep a high rod. As soon as I get the strike, I reel down and set the hook, and this rod has a really good backbone. 7.3, heavy action, perfect for worms, perfect for jigs, perfect for a big Carolina rig as well. There's a lot of things you could throw with this. You could even throw a big swim bait with it. But anyway, this is my heavy-duty worm rod. And it's something I use a lot. I mean, I do a lot of plastic worm fishing, but you need a pretty heavy rod for that, because I'm throwing in some real heavy cover sometimes. Okay, speaking of heavy cover, I really got heavy cover to work with now. You've heard me talk about, you know, what I've won most of my success in tournaments have been probably flipping and pitching. Well, here's the kind of rod that I use. This is a 7.5-foot flipping stick. And it has a big favorite reel, 8-to-1 ratio reel. It has 65-pound test braid. It's got an extended handle. It's got this big cushion button. I've even cut the tip down just a little bit and made it even heavier. If you notice that it's a short, stiff, heavy action flipping stick. Now, here's the beautiful thing about flipping. I can throw it into the worst cover in the world. I mean, the biggest bunch of logs and cover, and this is 65-pound braid. I can jack them out of there. Well, right now, I jacked it out of the bushes. I just want to show you something else. Right here is so representative. I want to show you something about this dock. And right here is where I'm fishing. And that is, if you look right here, in the water right here, all around here, that's all floating, that's all hydrilla that's floated up. It's pieces of palm trees. It's all sorts of junky stuff. And I can take this big pitching weight. This is either 1.5 ounces or 2 ounces, really heavy kind of a weight. And I can pitch it into places, like right into that heavy stuff, and it sinks right through there, right to the bottom. Okay, I get the rod into my stomach, and I'm getting ready to set the hook. Boy, I can jack them out of there now. That's a big deal for jacking them out. Okay, I'll go a little farther with the pitch like this. Okay, and I can get into that heavy cover right there. You know, there's a couple of different ways of both pitching and flipping, and again, it's all done with these big heavy-duty 7.5-foot flipping sticks. And to pitch, I just hold it like this and just kind of swing it way out there. And I get way up underneath the bushes like that. Again, I get my rod down in a low position. I'm ready to set the hook. I can do damage. I've got 65-pound test braid, and I can really set the hook well. Well, I do a lot of work, because I tell you, wherever you go, here's the thing. You might say, well, gosh, I'm from California. I don't have a lot of heavy water. You do. You have flipping water. I've flipped a lot of places in California. The beavers knock trees down that are perfect for fishing. I remember one time I was on Lake Lanier in Georgia, and I happened to find a tree that they'd just cut down that day. It was the first day of the tournament. And I went into the tree, and I caught a whole bunch of bass on that one tree that beavers had just cut it down. But I needed that heavy rod like this. Okay, a lot of times you'll find in the Midwest where the floods have come along, and the floods have actually piled up leaves and debris and logs and all sorts of stuff that piled up in the back of these creeks. Perfect place to flip. Okay folks, let's go look at the 5th rod. The last and the final rod of my 5 rod complement that I think you need. My last rod, my 5th rod, and that's my frog rod. I love frog fishing. Just a really great thing, and this is a little bit lighter action than my flipping stick. You could say, well, why can't I use the frog on a flipping stick? You can. I like this little bit shorter but very stiff and stout frog rod. It gives me a little bit better cast, a little bit more accurate, it's a little bit easier to fish, and I think it just sets the hook so exquisitely well. Particularly, it has a long handle, it has a big ug button, and again, what I do with frog fishing is a little bit different. Let me just show you what I'm doing. Okay folks, I'm in a perfect spot to show you how to frog fish. Now there's probably not any fish right here. It's not a really good spot, but it does have the right ingredients, and that is it has matted up floating hydrilla. And there's so many places around Florida, particularly, or all around the South for that matter, where you have matted up hydrilla. It could be matted up lily pads in Missouri or in Michigan or someplace. It could be milfoil out in California. It could be any number of things. Just matted up grass in general is the kind of thing you want to fish a frog. Now, speaking of frog complements, I deal with Dean Rojas, the guy that actually built this frog called the Bronze Eye series by Spro. Dean created this frog, and he's the champion frog fisherman of all times, and I fished a lot with Dean. I've done several films with Dean. Also Ish Monroe, his buddy, and I've filmed with him. These guys are all advocate 65-pound test braid for frog fishing. Okay, a big heavy rod like this one, pretty much the same as this rod, and a nice system we can anchor it in good. Okay, now what I'll do to fish the frog properly is I'll throw it to the mat, let it sit on the mat, okay, and I'm just gonna kind of ease it along. Now I'm holding kind of a high rod. It's kind of like a worm. As soon as I get a strike, I'll drop the rod and set the hook, you know, just like a worm strike. In the meantime, I'm throwing the little holes in the grass. I'm easing that thing along. I'm hopping it along like a frog would hop. And when I get to the edge, okay, I work the edge just a little bit like I'm working now. As soon as I get it to the edge, nothing's bit it. Okay, I'll reel it in, and I'll look around for another good spot, and I'll throw it in. Anyway, folks, I've shown you the 5 rods that I think I would like to fish. There's other rods to think about. There's live bait rods, there's finesse rods, there's rods like that. But as a power fisherman, and as a guy, I fish from Connecticut to California. I fish all over the place. And these 5 rods would get me to some good bass water, get me all the patterns that I ever want to fish. And I think it'll do the same for you as well. Hey, so thanks for watching our YouTube. Thanks for subscribing. And we'll see you again soon.